Hey, welcome to the Art Condition Podcast, a weekly show that will discuss the business, community, and often undiscussed stress and mental health concerns of being a professional artist, or even a serious hobbyist. I'm Joby. I've been in the tattoo and illustration professions for 25 years. My co-host is Moose, a data analyst, social media manager, and art agent. If you enjoy the content, please consider visiting the Patreon page in the show notes to help support the effort. Or if that's not an option, please like, subscribe, leave a good review, or just share with your friends. And definitely go visit the links of our guests on this episode. Thanks for listening, and have a great day. This week we are talking to Beth Johnson. Beth is an artist who has chosen to take the path of teacher and mentor. We talked to her about her passion to nurture young minds and help keep the creative spirit alive during a time when young people will feel powerful external forces pressing on them. High school. We discussed the relationship between students and teachers and what each can do to maximize the positive outcomes in the relationship. Having been in each role at various times in her life, Beth brings a valuable insight for anyone who finds themselves in either. And lastly, we talk about the temptations that teaching can have for the ego and how to avoid becoming overzealous when given the opportunity to shape impressionable minds. This episode is a bit more philosophical than hard business, but it's a great episode to take time and reflect on our mindset and worldview, and I think you will find it to be a warm light of encouragement. So without further delay, here's our talk with Beth Johnson. Hello, Beth. Hi.
Hi.
Can we get one more that's just like super fucking epic? Like,
Hi,
yeah.
Joby. I'm so glad to be here. Hi, welcoming myself. Good Lord, I'm here.
I would like to welcome myself to this podcast. All of you may join me. But seriously, thank you so much, Beth, for being here. I've been looking forward to this. It's going to be awesome. And let's get right to it. Tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, how you got into art, and what wrapped you up in the rope and tied you to the tree forever.
Oh God, that's a big question. Well, I mean, what really got me into it is just being able to pick up a pencil and draw. I've been drawing ever since I could do that. I didn't initially start off with any sort of lessons or anything like that. It was just a bunch of just self-taught stuff, looking at art books and watching TV shows that were about art and whatnot. And I didn't really start taking any classes for art until high school because I had to. But fortunately, I ended up with a very, very good art teacher. She was very invested in seeing that the students, loved art, and not necessarily loved art, but didn't hate things by the time they were done in her class. So that's really like it. As far as like my background, like I do have like, some art school under the belt. I do have an associate's. I am working towards a BFA with a early childhood through 12th grade certification so I can teach art in a public school setting. But yeah, other than that, like, I don't know, I just like to do this stuff for fun.
So knowing that, you want to get into teaching and you've had some formal art training, art education in the past, studying art in college. Tell us what that was like. Tell us about that experience.
Oh Lord. See, my experience with taking art classes is largely different than a lot of people's that I've heard of, because I don't know. I just approach things a little differently when I go to school, and I don't tend to take things so personally in regards to like critiques or how the teachers handle things. But I was fortunate enough to have some very good art teachers who were very invested in seeing that I furthered whatever career I wanted to in art. So I always had teachers that were very encouraging. They didn't want to do that whole cookie cutter thing of like do things the way I do, and if you don't do it my way, it's the wrong way, sort of thing. So that was largely my experience, and has been for the majority of the time that I've been taking, classes. So
in the art world, or certainly I think in the circles that you and I have in common, there's the question often comes up, like, should I go to art school or not? So I would phrase it a little bit differently. If somebody was thinking about that question, like what should be their considerations as far as like, should I go to art school or should I not? Like what are some like guidelines that people can use to answer that question for themselves before just taking it on the word of other people?
Oh gosh. So I would say consider what you want your career to be in art. That's going to be really your biggest key thing. So for me, I wanted to teach art. Well, unfortunately, unless I have that little piece of paper that says I'm capable of teaching, even though I've been teaching for years, I'm not going to be able to find a career doing that. So definitely career is, you're going to be your biggest thing. If you want to just to go, I say go for it. Just understand that you're going to be spending a lot of money just to learn how to do art when you can definitely go onto the internet and find a wealth of resources available to you. So there's pluses and minuses to it. But I would say if you're just interested in learning how to do art, don't go. But definitely, like, if you're wanting to do something, I don't know, like teaching or graphic design or character design or anything like that, any sort of big industry sort of art jobs, then definitely you're going to want to consider going to school for that.
The degree is required to teach in a school, like in a university, in a high school, in an elementary school. But it's not required to teach like for tutorials on Gumroad, which are like very, I want to say lucrative, but I don't know if there's a better word for that. Do you have any thoughts on balancing the idea of teaching in school versus teaching on a Gumroad or a Patreon?
I mean, it really is just going to kind of depend on where you want to teach and what your target audience is for what you want to teach. Myself, I remember the kind of impact that my art teachers had on me, and I wanted to be in this sort of setting where I could do that. That's not to say that you can't have that sort of impact on Gumroad or Patreon or anything like that. You can, but I feel like it's a little less personal, and even then, that's not to say that you can't develop a rapport sort of relationship with the folks that follow along and learn from you on sites like that. But I really wanted to have that sort of meaningful connection with kids, because it's so crucial during that stage of their lives to be able to have somebody that's kind of in their corner rooting for them, even if they don't think much of themselves. So really, it's that's about out for that.
I forget what it is, but there's some number of people in your life that you can actually remember who they are and anything about them. So if you are to like blow up and have 100,000 people that buy your tutorials, they're just gonna be names or usernames to you. They're not gonna be a person. But if you're doing in-person learning, assuming the class sizes are manageable, you can actually put a face to a name and a personality to that, and actually help them one-on-one.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it really just it came down to like being a personal thing. Now, I do sort of like Twitch for that sort of you know platform, as far as like being able to teach, because there is a huge opportunity to teach there, and there have been plenty of moments where people have come into my streams and they've been like, well, how do I do XYZ, and I'm able to utilize that platform to do that. It's very much a teaching sort of platform as well as a social sort of thing as well. So Um, and with that, like, because I have such a small community, I am able to build that sort of rapport with the folks that come into my stream. I've made many good friends, many very, very dear, close friends because of Twitch. So, but I'm not looking to necessarily teach in a high school setting to make friends. Obviously, like, I'm looking to teach and encourage and inspire kids to want to do art. So.
Yeah, that's the part that is hard to recreate in a Gumroad or another type of tutorial. Certainly there have been tutorials that I've followed along with online that have completely changed my perspective from a technical standpoint, but that personal connection is definitely just as valuable. And yeah, that's harder to recreate. And but I think that the two can work together. Like if it is online stuff that you're following along with or using to guide your education, I think it's critical to be in a community of peers like Twitch or Discord channels or whatever, something that can give you that and supplement that that social aspect of it. So when you were in a formal education setting, or since your formal education setting, what have you learned that you wish that you would have learned in your formal education setting?
What have I learned that I wish I would have learned in my formal education?
Yeah, I guess
setting?
a better way of asking that question is like, what do you what do you think your experience of learning art in school missed? Like, what do you think they could have done?
Honestly, like, I can't answer that question very well because I don't feel like they really missed anything thus far. I'm not saying that won't happen, but I feel like with the teachers that I've had and the classes I've been able to take, they really have kind of touched on everything that I feel like would have needed to be touched on in those classes, from learning different techniques to encouraging, the students to do their own thing. Like I said, I've been very fortunate enough to have good teachers that did everything that I felt like they were supposed to do. So I don't feel like I can answer that question very accurately, unfortunately.
No, that's fair. It's not unfortunate. Like it's as I think about as I think about it after I ask it, it's a bit of a loaded question, simply because so much of the feedback that I hear from people that like went to art school or studied art has some negative connotation to it. Like it's like often heard like, oh, this is something that I've learned since then that I wish they would have taught this, or I wish they would have taught more of that. So no, I think it's not unfortunate. I think it's great to be able to hear that, because I think that it underscores that it's art in a time when I think that art school can kind of get like a bad rap, or some people can have like very strong negative emotions and be very vocal about those strong negative emotions. It's like it's cool to hear that like, no, it can be different. Your experience can be good.
Oh, certainly. It absolutely can be different. It varies from person to person. Like, my experience is not going to be yours, not going to be anybody else's, and I go into things with, different sort of mindset anyways. Like I'm here to learn. I'm not necessarily here to, I don't know, like, I just kind of look at what am I going to take out of this class? Not necessarily like the instructor, even though the instructor is important,
So we do have a question that relates to this. Since that your education was so well received, what was the name of the college that you attended?
Well, I started off at a local community college here. It's called College of the Mainland, so nothing real huge. Not like an actual art school, just a school that happened to have an art program. And then I'm currently at University of Houston. They have a fantastic art program. Really just amazing instructors, and just have made it a great experience so far.
So having chosen to take this path of educator rather than trying to make a living directly from the art itself, what has your professional life up until now been like? And what led you into pursuing art education? Like, what led you to that transition?
Oh Lord. Okay. So as soon as I got out of high school, I knew in high school that I wanted to be a teacher. And I wasn't quite sure what kind of teacher I wanted to be. At first, I just knew I wanted to teach. But as soon as I got done with high school, I started teaching pre-K. And I did that for about, oh Lord, 14 years before I left and became an EMT of all things. And, you know, all through that time, like it was hit or miss that I would go to school because life happens and everything. Um, but there was always that desire to want to teach and especially, loving art. It just kind of was a natural thing. Like, well, duh, I love art and I like to teach or I want to teach. So let's just do that. And lo and behold, the school that I'm currently enrolled in, um, they have a fantastic art education program too. So it just kind of made sense to go that route. So pretty much every decision I've made since then, school wise, has been towards that sort of goal.
Being in a program that's teaching you how to teach. What's involved in that? How do you teach somebody how to teach?
Oh gosh. So that is so hard because I used to be a curriculum director, and that is a really, really hard job because when you get adults coming into school, for instance, learning how to teach, you're already set in your ways. So in regards to learning how to teach, you have to have an open mind. But really, that's the same with like any sort of profession, any skill, any sort of class you go into. You have to go in to that class, to that program, whatever, willing to listen and take in whatever information they give you, and then turn that around and make it sort of your own. So just a willingness to listen and be this lifelong learner, because there's no one way to teach. There's many different ways to teach, and my methods aren't necessarily going to be the same for the next person. So I guess just having that willingness to learn. You can learn all the theories and whatnot you want about teaching and about all the child psychology behind it, but I think what's been really helpful has been having that experience teaching pre-K for all the years that I have. That real life experience is going to be really important too. And I know they have you do observations and student teaching and whatnot, but it really doesn't give you that sort of experience like enough as so much as like just diving in there and just actually doing it and figuring out like what methods we want to apply to our classroom and whatnot. So
yeah, Shane in the chat was saying that education programs teach you all of the theory of teaching and none of the practice. And yeah, it's that practice part that seems like it could really only be hands-on. Like hands-on experience that's really going to give you that understanding, because you can't really teach somebody experiences or teach somebody wisdom. But I'm wondering, like, is there like, I think about in psychology, there's these different schools of psychology. Don't ask me to name one off the top of my head. I'll totally butcher it, like cognitive, behavioral, blood, yab, dab, dab.
Yeah,
is there
you can ask me to do that stuff either.
Is there something similar in teaching? Like, are there different sort of like schools of thought in terms of like what makes good, or like what types and theories of teaching there are?
I mean, I suppose so, but like I said, everybody has their sort of, different ways and methods as far as like the teaching portion of, school. I haven't had too much of that just yet. It's mostly been, um, just the art portion. So, but as far as like my real world experience, yeah, there's definitely, different ways, and everybody's got their sort of, you know, approaches to things. And you often find that like older teachers, and this is nothing against like older teachers and whatnot, but they have their ways. Like children must line up and must do this thing and must, it's very like regimented and whatnot, and less about letting children like explore and play and learn through, those tactile, hands-on sort of experiences. So it's really just kind of depends on the person, I suppose. And I guess we'll find out as far as, what they want to teach in school. I have had a little bit, but I would say like not enough.
And you've touched on this briefly before, but what kind of setting do you want to work in most, as far as like an age group or?
Oh gosh, I would love to teach in high school. Because I just remember that being a really, really hectic part of my life, and just needing people in my corner. And some of the people that were always in my corner were several teachers that I had, and in particular, the art teachers that I had. So that was a huge, inspiration for me, wanting to go in that direction, and teaching in a high school setting. Like I said, it's just this crucial time where kids need people. They need people very, very badly. They're going through all sorts of hormonal changes and everything. So, if I could be somebody that a kid could lean on just for a little while they have me in that hour long or however long that class is, then I think that would be a good day's work.
This feels like kind of the best combination of scenarios, where you are, part of people's lives, teaching them art, kind of helping to like nurture and develop that part of it. And then it's like you were just saying, especially with kids who really in the age group, especially that you're talking about, really can benefit the most from that. But then you still have private art life, like a place where you are just doing things for yourself. So you're, like when you're working as a professional artist, it can become kind of a drag, because then it's just like, this is, I have to be creative, but I have to be creative in this very particular way. But then, I don't know, it seems like there's some appeal in being an art teacher where you're like helping teach others creativity, and then you like still have like all of that creative energy left over for yourself, because you don't have the expectations of clients to create a particular kind of artwork. I mean, it's just the minds of kids. What's the worst that could happen?
Oh, I don't know. You could teach them to change the world.
Yeah, do that.
God forbid.
Please
absolutely. Yeah.
So was this intentional? Like, did you kind of like have some of these things in mind when you're thinking about teaching art?
Oh yeah. I mean, the direction was always intentional. Really, because there's always that sort of fear in the back of your head, of going into like freelance work, because that was something that I had considered as well. But there's always those times, those lulls in the work, and that fear of, oh my God, where is the income going to come from? So the thought process there was, okay, well, why don't I do something that's still art related? So that way, when there is a lull in the work, because let's be fair, there will be a lull in the work. There always is. I can still fall back on all right, I'm still doing something meaningful and art related and inspiring others to go and create art and do these things as well. So, yeah, definitely it was extremely intentional. Just wanted to make sure I had that sort of, backup plan, really.
I know we mentioned Gumroad and Patreon didn't have the one-on-one that you were so interested in having, but have you considered, just utilizing those platforms to generate the additional income during those lulls, or was it always I need to go into education straight up in school stuff?
Um, so I hadn't really considered those things here until fairly recently, because when I started going to school, those things were not an option. Um, the internet was still pretty much baby at that point. So now, yeah, that's definitely something I'm considering, and definitely something that um, right now would probably be very beneficial given all the life changes going on and whatnot here. But yeah, that's definitely something that could be helpful. Just a matter of sitting down and doing it, I suppose.
And having a background in education puts you as a leg up on everybody else that has just been doing the art and are now trying to figure out all the stuff on the fly of how you actually make something educational. There's a lot of analysis paralysis going on where they're like, I need to set up all this stuff in advance, and I don't know how to do that. And once I do that, then I have to do actually the speaking portion of it and recording of it in the video. And that seems overwhelming for a lot of people. They may have the knowledge, but they don't have the ability to set it up.
Yeah, it can be a little overwhelming, especially if you're not used to doing that sort of thing. I still get like, oh gosh, I still get overwhelmed like speaking to people. Even now beforehand, I was like, oh my god, I'm having this podcast with Joby and Moose, but I'm like, oh, I know these guys, it's not a big deal. um but speaking of strangers, that's a whole other thing. So I can definitely see that sort of concern there with others. And I think so far as like recording videos and whatnot, you're just recording a video of yourself. It's not like you're speaking live. It's not like you're on Twitch or anything like that, where you are live and are before a live audience. It's a whole lot different. But I think that experience is definitely very helpful. And I've always had a career where I had to be able to speak to people, even though that's something that absolutely terrifies me. So, it's definitely helped.
And I guess the more personal version of that would be like either offering courses online, like Justin Donaldson did, or one-on-one mentorships, which I believe Allie Briggs does, for example. And our prior guest, Paul Canavan, also offers mentorships. So his are way more advanced as far as like what level he wants people to starting with when he was working with them. I don't know how much. I'm curious about how much parents would be interested in having their kids put through with a tutor. Basically, is I guess the equivalent level there.
Um, I guess it's really going to depend on the parents. It's going to depend on the kids. If my kid comes to me and they say, hey, mom, I want to do like art courses, then yeah, I'm certainly going to look for those sorts of programs. And look to see if there's any sort of like tutoring sort of things available, or any, Gumroad, Patreon, anything like that available. But, I guess it's just case by case, depends on the parent, depends on the kid, depends on the desire to do it.
Well, fingers crossed that the market actually exists and can be utilized by you or any of the people that are watching, thinking about getting into the educational sphere of art.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting idea, like the idea of an art tutor, like rather than like a high level like mentor that's trying to like guide you into some like, serious like professional capacity, for younger people who maybe haven't even developed that concept of their path in life yet, but still are interested in art, want to learn about art, and having some kind of resource online. It's like, I'd be surprised if there wasn't something like that already. But anyway,
I think it kind of relates to what David was saying when we talked with him. how every year fewer kids raise their hand when you ask who likes art. So if the parent is interested in their kid continuing to raise their hand every year, then a tutor would be one way to keep them interested, whether it's over the course of the summer when they're away, or during COVID season when they aren't in class with the instructor one-on-one. And it's all the teacher's talking to the screens, and the kid's not talking back through the screens. At least that's my understanding through Shane, who's lamented his experience with COVID remote learning.
Yeah, I imagine there's that sort of disconnect with the being able to get sort of that personal interaction, just because there's that screen in between you and your students. But that would be really interesting to see if there was something like that available, or even starting something like that for people that had that desire.
And also now homeschooling is taking off. So if the parents themselves know that they want their kids to have art in as a background, some part of creativity as their curriculum, but they themselves are not learned, I think that's the correct pronunciation of that, in how to teach art, or how to have their kids at whatever developmental level interact with art, then they might want to reach out for a professional for their input.
Yeah, absolutely. That would I hadn't even considered the homeschooling aspect. So yeah, that would definitely be something that I consider doing, especially given COVID and all of this stuff. And there is that sort of like requirement in educational programs to have the art. So if you have somebody there that's willing to teach and teach it well, then I don't see why that wouldn't be something that's completely beneficial.
I think at this point, I have to name drop every guest that we've ever had on this podcast. But Blake, our friend Blake, he is now doing full-time illustration work for a homeschooling company. So it might be worth reaching out to them to see if there's any interest in having an art wing to their company, which would be a landing spot for you, I guess, if this is something you're interested in.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I will have to reach out to Blake, actually.
That would be awesome. I mean, I'm curious to know more about that myself. So if you could do that for me as well, that would be fantastic. Okay.
No, yeah, absolutely.
And we have some more questions coming up too about that thing that Moose mentioned, where every year fewer and fewer hands go up when you ask who likes to draw. But before that, kind of recalling something earlier in our conversation about art school horror stories, and and how we all know that at least a few people that have art school horror stories to tell. Some even so bad that it drove them away from art for a while to begin with. It's pretty obvious when we meet a bad teacher, somebody that just makes our life shit.
Oh yes.
What makes a good
Cough,
teacher?
Mrs. Hinckley, cough.
My cough would go on for the rest of the show.
Oh, good Lord.
So if we know what makes a bad teacher, that's sort of self-evident. But what makes a good teacher?
Oh Lord. Well, a good teacher is an active listener. First and foremost, they really need to be able to listen to their students and hear what their needs and desires are. They need to have strong communication skills, obviously. They need to be adaptable, because hell, one thing could happen and throw the whole day off, and you need to be able to kind of roll with the punches sometimes, especially that's especially true with younger kids, for sure. That's where largely my experience has been. Empathy is going to be another super important aspect, needing to understand that where that kid's coming from. Being patient. Oh, good Lord. Patience is definitely going to be a huge key to being a good teacher, because I've seen so many teachers just kind of lose their minds on kids, and they're tired. They're tired and overworked and underpaid, and I get it. But that patience is always going to be necessary for your class, not only for yourself, but in helping them, I guess, just have a good learning environment, a good welcoming environment. And also, like, I think it's important to be like a lifelong learner. I touched on that just a little while ago. Being always willing to look at new methods and change and grow as the need arises, because sometimes things do change, and you have to be willing to, again, just adapt and learn and do something new. So
this is a related question, but there's I think a subtlety to it, and I know that it's personal, so I am just asking your personal feeling on this. But like, what's the role of a teacher in your estimation?
Oh gosh, I mean, the role of the teacher is to facilitate the learning in the classroom, and you facilitate that learning through all of those good qualities of being, a good teacher. So, I don't know. I don't really have a very in-depth answer for that one. Just got to be willing to listen, be patient, and adapt, and
Is it the role of the teacher to keep the student on track? Like there was
Oh, sure.
the Cobra Kai where they were trying to have the guy use the old Mr. Miyagi's teachings, and the method got the student really bored and distracted, and did not think they were learning anything, so they stormed off. So is the teacher's role to keep the student knowing that they're continuing to make progress, or is that on the student to see their progress?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. Because there are, unfortunately, with teaching in high schools, and just public schools in general, there are those milestones that they're going to want you to have those kids get to. But ultimately, like, it's going to be important to just kind of assess where the kids are. And if the kids aren't learning something, there could be a whole wealth of reasons why they're not learning it. Maybe your teaching style doesn't suit them. Maybe they have some kind of learning disability. Maybe they're struggling at home. There could be any number of things. So that's where that, that being a good active listener and, that empathy and patience are going to come in, so you can kind of see, all right, if we're not on track, why aren't we? What's the deal here? So.
Or it could be a gap in the curriculum, maybe, where there's too little time being spent on something that ends up being critical. So you're building on something that they have a weak foundation in, and then it just falls apart after that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like there could be any number of reasons why a kid might be, quote unquote, falling behind or anything like that. So, maybe they're not being challenged enough by the curriculum, and that's where, your adaptability is going to come into play. If your curriculum says, all right, let's have the kid draw rainbows, and the kid's already drawing rainbows and now they're acting out in class. All right, well, how can we, take this unit about rainbows and, make it to where the child is, more engaged in that sort of lesson, so that they're not having those behavioral issues. That's just one of many things.
So now you have the child drawing the unicorn vomiting out a rainbow.
You know what? And if they do, that's freaking amazing. More power to them. I would love to see that in my classroom, actually.
There you go. Your first lesson as an art teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. Unicorns barfing rainbows. I'm going to keep that in the old lesson plan book.
Well, excluding external conditions or medical conditions, or things that aren't necessarily within the student's control, it's like putting that aside, are there things that go into making a good student?
Oh, sure. I would say the same sorts of things that go into, making a good teacher also go into, making a good student. We're of course excluding, other factors that would go into this sort of thing, but being a good listener and learning how to absolutely hear people instead of just glossing over stuff, and having that willingness to always learn and always take in something new, information, being patient with the teacher, because sometimes you don't get along with the teacher's teaching style, and really you're there to learn. So what are we going to glean from the information that we're getting? And that all goes back to being a good listener. So
it seems like that in itself should be, maybe I'm just not remembering correctly, but I don't remember, well, to the degree that there was any emphasis on how to be a good listener, or how to be a good student. None of that sticks out of my mind as much as whatever sort of, other kind of bullshit they were they wanted me to regurgitate. It almost seems like that's and for teachers too, that there's a lot of importance in teaching somebody how to listen, both teachers and students. Do you experience any of that? In the I know you were saying earlier, it's a little bit early on for you, but do you have a sense of that being part of a teacher's education in learning how to teach others, that those are conversations that happen?
Oh yeah, I mean, are you talking about as far as teaching people how to be good listeners and how to be able to get that information, get the most they can out of whatever they're trying to learn, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, part of that, at least in my experience teaching so far, is going to be just a reiteration of what your expectations are in the classroom, and that does fall to the teacher to teach those kids not only that they should listen, because how many times have you been told by an adult that you should do something, you have to do something, and you're like, oh no, screw you, I'm not gonna do that.
That doesn't work.
Yeah, no, it doesn't work. So when we tell kids, all right, you should listen, here's why you listen. Here's what's going to happen if you do. Here's what's going to happen if you don't. And then putting those expectations into practice every day in your classroom is going to encourage kids to build those necessary skills that they need to develop, good listening skills and whatnot. So every morning when I'm doing circle time with the kids, we go over our classroom rules. And one of our rules is use your listening ears and looking eyes. Okay, well, why? Why should we do that? Well, because if we don't listen, we're going to miss out on something really cool. We got lots of fun, really nice things to do. If you're not listening, you might miss, whatever, any sort of important announcement, anything. So, we tell them the whys of, these expectations, and then they're more willing to do these things and develop those skills. It helps build a really good foundation for later on in life.
You mentioned drawing circle time, and that made me think of the introduction for any tutorial on the fundamentals is drawing circles. And they'll often start also by saying how you should hold the pen or a pencil loosely, and how you should draw from the shoulder and the elbow rather than the wrist. Is this something that's taught at the early levels? Because I don't remember getting this, and so I had developed a lot of bad habits along with my life and bad posture as a result. And I'm thinking it would be so much better to ingrain this in kids earlier rather than later, but I'm not sure if they would listen.
Well, again, I don't necessarily remember too much of posture and whatnot being taught in art, although I did have that sort of thing, like in college and whatnot, maybe not necessarily in high school. But again, that's going to go back to, that's something, first of all, that's something that should be taught. I guess developing good habits starts early. You have to start those things early. It's not to say you can't learn them later on in life, but how many times has we adults, gone to learn something new and found it that much more difficult because, well, we're already set in our ways, or so it's just going to go back to that teacher establishing those expectations and those ground rules and whatnot at the beginning so that you have those good habits later on.
So when we say art teacher, just those words probably invokes like a whole range of images and memories for people. And there's a lot of places where those things are going to overlap. And a lot of places where that's going to invoke a lot of art teacher tropes and cliches from pop culture. What do you want your classroom experience to be like?
Oh Lord.
You can also imagine.
I don't know.
Sorry to interrupt. You could also imagine this.
No, it's okay.
In a perfect world kind of scenario. You know what I mean? Like, what is your highest expectation? Whether it's functionally feasible to get there for whatever reason, never mind that. Just like best case.
Oh man, best case, I would just love for kids to be able to come into an environment that's warm and inviting and fun and not so, I don't know, sterile looking and, terrifying. I want them to be able to come in there and go, wow, this is a place I can come and be safe. And actually learn something and have fun doing it. Even if my intention is never, ever, ever to do art. Well, I'm here and I'm having fun. And the teacher really gives, really cares about how I'm doing, regardless of whether I'm quote unquote good at art or not. That really is like my ultimate goal as far as what I want that classroom environment to look like. And if that means I'm some kooky art teacher that, has fun and has tattoos and, listens to crazy music while the kids are doing art, then, whatever. If that's what makes them comfortable and feel safe, then okay, cool,
So you mentioned something in there that made me think of a question, like whether their intention is to do art or not, like professionally or long term or whatever. It made me think of, it's a big question. It's sort of unfair to ask this, so I'm not like expecting, like groundbreaking whatever. But like, why is art important? Like, why? It's barely hanging on as part of the curriculum in some schools because it isn't given importance, and I think our artists know whether they're able to maybe like verbalize it, or convince other people, or have like a conscious description of this themselves. Like, we know it because we live it, but when you're trying to convince other people, like, why should other people care about art?
Well, I mean, art is literally the foundation for so many things that people are involved with and love, from movies and TV. And it's not even just that, it's music and graphic design. And it's more than just your visual arts that hang in a gallery. It's pretty much anything visually or anything that you can listen to or anything like that. It's just a foundational thing. It should be as basic as, and required as stuff like English and science and math, just because it goes into so many things. It's crucial. And when you don't have art and you don't have that sort of, I wouldn't say necessarily like background, but like understanding why art is important, and you don't have the arts available, then you lose all of those things. You lose the little nuance and stuff. You lose, you got your music industry, you got movie industry, you got everything that is just based in this background in art. So yeah, it's super important.
And I'd argue that it's one of the few subjects that remain that are still taught that have any level of creativity in them. So creative thinking. So that leads to creative problem solving, which leads to innovation, which would pump out even the STEM field improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we, at least in my classroom, we encourage the children to learn through play, and a lot of that play is involved surrounding like art related activities and just allowing them to freely explore, because when we allow them to freely explore with art, then we start seeing other concepts start taking shape, and you know, like their concept of math starts to get a little stronger, and their concept of, you know, spelling, or just really anything you can kind of incorporate into that, and letting the kids play and do art and have fun and explore on their own. So when you lose that foundation, you lose something really like crucial right there at the very beginning, you know.
I'm fairly ignorant on how education is in the rest of the world, having been, I was growing up exclusively in America. My understanding is like in Europe and Scandinavian countries, the education is more focused on play early on, and that helps them with their development later to be able to do all fields, not just art, but art especially as well, because obviously they have the background in it now that our students are more and more lacking because the budget cuts going first to art. So I'd be curious how much more advanced education in the United States could be if we had more room for play, as you're suggesting in your classroom.
Oh gosh, it could literally be like life changing. Just this mind blowing, change in the way that kids are taught and the way the kids are learned when they're just allowed to. And it's, excuse me, it's not necessarily like a free for all. So when I say let them play, it's guided play, it's guided time. But it's still allowing them to explore freely within the confines of whatever activity it is we're doing. Because then later on, that helps them not be so, it helps them have a bigger appreciation for whatever it is they're sitting down to learn. And I have had parents come up to me like years later after I've had their kids, and they go, well, my kid still loves XYZ subject because you taught them whatever, or you let them experiment with a chessboard or whatever it is. So yeah, I mean, I think super important for play to be active, play to be taking part, in every lesson, whether it's math or whatever. Our math lesson last week, all week, was just about letting the kids practice playing games together. And so the kids got to play Candyland all week in math. And that's what they did. And they had a blast doing it, but they learned so much more than just playing Candyland. They learned how to work together. They learned how to count. They learned the different colors on the cards. There's so many lessons that can be taken from that. It's not just them playing a game,
That reminds me of how I learned to type. I had like dedicated classes in elementary school for typing practice on the keyboard, and I was terrible at it. I was like, I'll just let my mom type all my homework for me, because that's the thought process of a kid. And that summer, we went home and played StarCraft. And what do you do in StarCraft? You type. You talk to your allies. And you need to type fast. So that's how I learned to type fast, by playing a freaking video game. It had nothing, like all the time in the world they gave me just to type out these things from copy this sheet into this document did nothing for me. I was miserable, and if it was up to me at that point, I would never touch a keyboard again. But because of play let me do it, and now I type for a living.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, of course, like there is some importance to rote memorization. Like, you're gonna need to learn things, and memorizing them, practicing them over and over is important. But if that's all you do, then that's not fostering a love of learning any subject, regardless of whether it's art, math, or anything like that. So, the fact that you got to experience that, through play and learn that typing through play. This shows me that play is super crucial to a kid's development, even early on.
Is there a way to gamify art?
Oh gosh. I mean, I guess it's really just anything. First and foremost, like with art, you allow the free exploration of different media. You don't sit there and you tell kids, well, you must use these pastels a certain way or whatever. Only color within the lines. No, like you just let them be free to explore those things. As far as like gamifying it, I mean, sure, I'm sure there's different ways and things that you could do, make it fun. Like, okay, today we're going to learn, I don't know, we're going to learn about primary colors, and we're going to play a little game in regards to, how that's going to work. Pictionary. Yeah. Cave is saying Pictionary. That's another good thing. Absolutely. So there's any number of ways that you could make art fun and not just this, oh God, now we have to draw this thing or whatever,
Also, all the Jackbox games that are basically Pictionary with different rules.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I was thinking about whenever I have to tell someone asks for advice on how they should learn the fundamentals, and I have to point out that drawing boxes is in perspective is one of the best ways to learn form, and that's the most dry, boring subject in the world for many people. And after 5 boxes, they're like, okay, I learned it. I don't need to draw this ever again. But that's not true. They still need to work on it. So they give up.
Sure.
How do you make drawing boxes fun?
Oh Lord. Honestly,
right now on the spot.
Right now on the spot. Okay. I mean, there are going to be so that's going back to that whole rote learning is going to be key, building up that muscle memory, and that's why those things are important. But okay, you've drawn a box. Now how are we going to put that into practice? So I guess, all right, now you know how to draw a box. So what are we going to do with this box? We can go into perspective. We can go, okay, let's draw a bunch of boxes and make buildings out of them or whatever. Let's take that box and use it as that building block to create other things with it. And that's why we have those foundational things. So
yeah, you kind of read my mind with like what I was thinking as far as like the gamification of drawing a box is like, okay, well, what can you draw while you're drawing all of these boxes? How can you start orienting them and stacking them together to, make different things? And, that can be, part of the game is like, what are the different structures that you can imagine and build just using a box or whatever. And when you also, Moose, when you asked, how do you gamify art? I was kind of thinking that art has this sort of like built-in cheat mode in that regard, that it's sort of gamified from the outset
already. Yeah,
because it's because there's so much creative freedom within it. It's which can be a blessing and a curse too. Like there is like so much freedom and there is so much liberty that knowing where to start and what to how to give yourself an orientation can be difficult. And that seems like a place where a teacher really comes in handy. But
that reminds me of my like 3rd grade drawing assignment was involving dinosaurs. They gave us a dinosaur that already outline already put in, and we just drew over top of it, right? So I decided to put spikes on the tails or horns on it or sharp teeth. So giving the kids, if you're talking about children, then giving them the starting point of something that they can build off of is one way. Then you can, I don't know, put a competition to see who goes on the fridge. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's always that sort of like building block sort of idea, like, okay, we've learned how to draw this dinosaur. Now what are we going to do with it? We're going to put it in this sort of environment. We're going to we're not just going to color it with crayons. We're going to add, different materials to it to make it sort of, three-dimensional, a little more interesting, a little more tactile. And on top of that, when you're doing that sort of thing, you are encouraging the kids to utilize different materials, think critically about how they want to use these things, and when you make it fun like that, they don't really realize that they're actually like learning. So, you're kind of tricking them into learning, but it's great.
Yeah, going back to what we were talking about before, as far as like why art is important, and I think all of these things that we're talking about is speaks directly to that. All of these like creative ways of thinking, and just thinking of ways to think creatively requires this whole cycle of creativity in itself. But I don't know if I've ever thought about it in this explicit terms, artists knowing why art is important, and well, I should say, and standing up for that as well, like making the concerted effort to, like, whenever possible, kind of like play an activist role, for the the benefit of our peers, to make that defense. And it sounds like you Beth, you have that sort of in mind going into this, so that makes me excited and happy for the kids that you'll be teaching in the future, that they'll get some of that, which kind of leads me to my next question, which was also something that we hinted at way early on. When we're all kids, and when we're kids, we all love drawing. Like, every kid, in one way or another, like, loves to be creative. Maybe it's not, like, I know with my son, it's not as much as he loves like drawing, but he loves like building things. Like, he really loves like seeing three-dimensional things, and there's creativity in one way or the other. And then that gets less and less as time goes by. The creativity kind of goes down. For a lot of us, it stays put, but yeah, every year there's less and less hands that go up when somebody asks, who here loves drawing. Where do you think that gets lost? Like, why does that, what is it that starts tamping that down?
Well, I mean, it's less and less focus on play and having fun as you go throughout school. Because right now in my preschool, pre-K environment, we learn through play every day. The only time we really like have the kids sit down to do like a focused learning time is at the beginning of the day, when I'm setting the expectations for the day and talking about what we're doing. So we really lose that focus on like just having fun, and letting kids learn through having these hands-on experiences. We go into this sort of like rote learning, and you must memorize this, and you must do, and you must stay in the lines. And there's so much of that getting older, that it just kind of it squelches that sort of creative side in a lot of people. Not everybody, of course, but there certainly is a good deal of just loss getting older, because I think adults have lost sight of that. And I think that's because, well, we lost sight of it growing up, going through the school system and going through these motions of, all right, we're not kids anymore, we don't get to play anymore, therefore, like, play is for little ones. No, we're growing up, we don't play anymore. And really, I think it's losing that mindset of a child, of having that sort of willingness to just kind of let go and have fun and be free with that. That's where we lose it. And we lose it, I don't know, very early on in childhood too. It's kind of sad,
Yeah, I'm personalizing this, but all this talk really. But I'm thinking back every year. I was thinking in school, oh, this is gonna be my last fun year of school. After this is gonna be serious. And then as I was finishing college, I was like, oh no, after I finish college, I won't be able to have fun anymore because I have to get a job, and
Yeah.
there's no fun after this point. My life is over at this point. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It's that sort of like mindset that the fun is going to end the older you get, and that's really kind of sad. I remember being a kid thinking, like in 5th grade, for instance, they would always tell us, well, enjoy recess this year because the last year you're ever going to get recess, but that's yet another way we learn how to play is by having recess and being able to just go out and have fun and not be so rigid. I'm not saying that there's not a place for that sort of learning to take place, but when we lose that sort of fun mentality, that sort of learning through play mentality, then you have those sorts of thoughts growing up, like you were saying, Moose, like, oh God, I'm gonna finish college and then my life is over. I gotta work until I die. And that's, honestly, that's a really old mindset that I'd love to see people get out of,
Yeah, I love that idea of, well, forget loving to see people get out of that. Just get them out of it. You're gonna
Yeah.
have access to all of these young minds. Just you should tell them all to just drop out.
Listen, no, it is important to learn, but it's going to be important also. The other thing is teachers are crucial to helping kids foster a love of learning. And when you don't have teachers that love to teach, then you have miserable teachers that you're gonna always have kids that just hate learning because you have miserable teachers. So, of course, there's lots of things that go into making a good teacher. It's not just a teacher. It's not just you have to have a teacher that has this desire to teach. You have to have support from, your management, your administration, and all that stuff too, because those things can certainly make miserable teachers too. But it starts with that foundation of, teaching kids to have fun early on, because then those kids, they look at the fun that they had with those teachers and they go, oh wow, I want to teach too. So it's really, this whole world changing sort of idea to where if we're teaching kids to have fun and they remember the kind of fun that they had and in learning these things, then they also want to go teach and teach other kids to do the things that they learned how to do. So then we have this, this cyclical thing of kids going back, as adults to learn how to be good teachers so that they can raise up other kids going back to learn how to be good teachers, So I don't know, just starts really early. And I hate that, I'm not saying that dropping out is a bad course of action. It's certainly valid for lots of people, but it also makes me kind of sad that people have felt the need to have to do that because they were failed somehow by the system. So yeah.
No, that's in seriousness, that's so true. Like my high school experience, speaking as a dropout, my high school experience is exactly that. But there's nothing that I would have loved more than for that to have been a good experience, because I love learning. Like I mean, it's my passion and my desire to learn things didn't stop when I dropped out of high school, or I didn't drop out of high school in order to be like, well, fuck learning things. It's like, cool, now I have more time to read the books that I want to read. And yeah, man, like I would love for that to be more in place. But I don't know, that the one of the most reprehensible terms I think that has ever been thought of is that silly quip, those who can do and those who can't teach.
Oh my God.
Isn't that terrible?
I hate that so much.
It's so fucked up. It's like, dude, do you know how fucking hard it is to like teach?
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult to actually teach. Like when I started teaching, I didn't know crap about what I was doing. And it took a long time to be able to figure out, all right, what methods work, what doesn't, how should I behave when kids do XYZ. There's so many things that go into learning how to teach and being a good teacher. So no, I hate that. I hate that saying so much.
Yeah, it's so bizarre. And man, what a job. Like, if you're gonna hate a job, like, hating your teaching job just seems like such a bummer. Like, I there's a temptation for me to be like, just quit. Like, don't do that anymore. Like,
Yeah, no.
it's not going to pay you enough for you to hate it that much. So why do you keep doing it? But I'm sure it's more complex than that oversimplification, but I don't know, that tempted nonetheless.
The takeaway I got from that phrase was the fact that, as far as the United States, teacher pay is so much lower. So if you have to take it, the connotation was, if you're taking the teaching job, it was the thing you had to take because you couldn't get the other work. But that still doesn't sound great, because you still need teachers to be better than the people that are. It's basically just an argument for, we need to pay teachers more, so that becomes the competitive.
There you go.
Yeah, no, I mean, as far as like paying teachers more and encouraging them to do all of these things, like, yeah, there's so many things that go into making a good teacher, and teachers need to be knowledgeable in their fields. Otherwise, what the hell are you doing teaching if you're not knowledgeable in whatever it is you're teaching, So, and of course there's so many things that go into why teachers are unhappy too. I would dare say lack of support from administration, and low pay for all the stuff that we have to put up with. It wears on you when you have to deal with a soul suck of a job. Speaking from very huge experience, like, it just wears on you, and it really kills you when you have this desire to teach, but yet all these other external factors are making it so that your desire is just going away. When I left teaching a few years ago, I thought for sure I was never going to teach again. I thought for sure, and it wasn't because I hated teaching. It wasn't because I hated teaching. It was because I hated where I worked, and I hated the political nonsense that I had to deal with, and I hated the little bit of pay that I got, because I worked somewhere where they very much believed that you should teach on intrinsic value only. And I'm sorry, but intrinsic value doesn't, pay the bills, doesn't put food on my table. So it's really sad that teachers are undervalued the way that they are for everything that they have to deal with,
A little bit of a tangent here into, a little bit deeper into the sort of the trials and tribulations of the teaching world. Is it just a one-way street when it comes to, administration versus teachers? Or is there, I know there's the teachers union, which can exert a significant amount of influence, but you can correct me what I have wrong here. My impression is that that's not necessarily always directed, though, towards the administrators that they work with in any given school. That's just like, the bureaucracy of government. Is there an influence that teachers can exert over administration? Like, does that street go both ways?
Honestly, I would say that it depends on where you're teaching, because as a private school teacher, I don't really get much say in anything. I can affect my classroom directly, but as far as like administrative stuff, no, I don't get say over that. It's do as I say, not as I do sort of mentality where I work. So, and I would dare say that, like, we don't have a teaching union or anything like that. available for us, but so I couldn't really speak to how that works for places that do.
Oh, interesting. Here's my total ignorance. I had this like assumption that teachers unions were ubiquitous, like that they were.
Mm-mm.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
No, because I work for a franchise, so that's another thing. There's no union for that sort of thing. We're basically at the whim of, whoever's in charge.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, I don't know. There's so many directions that I could go, but I want to I want to get back to what we were talking about earlier. Is the creative spark that exists in all people, and then like kind of what happens to it later. You want to teach high school kids, and that's what I think sort of like where they're on that cusp of really with that's a big fork in the road for a lot of people. As far as like, are they gonna what are they gonna retain? What are they gonna lose as they keep plowing forward into adulthood? Being cool becomes like very important. And there isn't a recess in high school, there isn't a lot of just like free playing and stuff. So, I mean, do you have like ideas for that age group in particular of like how to, reinvigorate that sense of play and reinvigorate that love of creativity?
Honestly, I would really approach it the same way I approach it with 3-year-olds, and just letting the kids explore the materials. Okay, guys, we're going to learn about watercolors today, but before we actually get into the hows of doing the watercolors, here's the materials, here's the paper, have fun, explore. Because then they're not so bound to these rigid rules, and they get to see how these things function. We make it fun, and all right, now we're going to learn how to watercolor. And then once we learn the hows, it's like learning how to draw that box. Now, how are we going to build on that, and make that fun? Okay, so we have learned how to watercolor, and now we're going to apply that to such and such subject, or whatever you want. Have fun, go for it. Just letting the kids be free to explore and express themselves, because as teenagers, that's going to be really, really important, and allowing them to have a place to express whatever's going on inside, because it's a pretty tumultuous time in life. So when you have to be rigid and stick to these rules, and you're already dealing with all this stuff, the last thing you want to do is go to an art class and have to stay within the lines, So just making art fun again, and just kind of encouraging them to have that sort of childlike mentality when approaching art is going to be a really huge key and part of like my own teaching process.
Yeah.
So,
go ahead.
You mentioned the play being important, letting them explore. But I'm thinking right now of all the tutorials that I found, like either on Gumroad or Skillshare, or even YouTube, they're all pretty cut and dry. They're not as dry as draw a box. All of them, some of them are. But I'm wondering, as adults, now that we've already passed all this stuff and we're not kids anymore, and our amount of play is often limited to the video games that we're in or the Dungeons and Dragons tables we're at, is there still value in play for adults to learn? Or is it just get to the facts as quick as possible?
No, absolutely. There's still value in play. Like it doesn't stop when you're in high school. It doesn't stop when you're in college. I'm talking about a lifelong childlike mentality in approaching these things, and picking these materials up and having that desire to learn and explore and have fun. Even when you're 50, 60, 70 years old, never losing that desire to always learn something new. So there's absolutely value in play. There's value in structured activities too. Those things are important. I'm not saying that they're not, in no way. But when you don't have fun doing these things, then you got miserable people growing up, you know? That's why people hate math, because it sucks. They haven't had a good teacher sit down with them and make that math fun. It's been a bunch of rote learning and you must do this, and not explaining like why these things work, or, making that fun, or explaining the interconnectivity of certain numbers and whatnot. Like, you just lose all of that. So yeah, it's even as adults, outside of D&D, or any other tabletop sort of games, like video games, or just going out and, I don't know, taking a walk and drawing what you see, or whatever, going to museums and looking at stuff just because it's beautiful to look at. So yeah.
That actually puts you in alignment, I think, with Forrest Immel. I'm going to drop another previous guest, because why not? We'll make this the entire theme of the show. Just name as many prior guests as possible. But no, he gets in some arguments, I guess, or he comes with alternate point of views, where people are like pointing out how to learn, and they give the standard stuff of, go to Control Paint or go to drawbox.com. And Forrest is more open in saying, draw what you like drawing. Do that, because that's what will make you stick with it more. That's the short.
Yeah, absolutely. You start drawing something you don't want to draw, then no wonder you're bored with that. I draw fantasy art and pretty people because that's what I like to draw. It makes me happy. So you draw whatever you want. Draw whatever makes you feel good, and or doesn't make you feel good. Because sometimes it's about exercising those demons that you got inside of you. And sometimes it's not all pretty fun and games, but it's the thing that you've chosen to do because it makes the art feel worthwhile. So, it's so much more than foundational stuff, which is important. But again, like, if you're losing that sense of wonder and play, then you're going to grow up not loving that stuff at all.
So it sounds like there's actually a niche open for like how to learn to draw and have fun while doing it. The closest I can think of is Jazza, but he's just entertainment at this point, where he's drawing upside down or whatever. So.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah, you have to be both, like being an entertainer, but then also being, structured, and that can be hard to do. It's very easy, I think, to just slide into one or the other. I'm interested to.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Did you?
No. I was just agreeing with you.
I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this. I don't know if this is something that happens to other people or if it's just me. There's this tendency, in my experience, well, I've experienced it from other people, and I've sensed it in myself, this temptation to want to make people that you're teaching become just little photocopies of yourself. Just because that works, it's like there's this thing that you have, and that you understand the power of it. You've seen it like work for yourself or whatever. So you're just like, you do this. No, if you just do this, this is how it's going to be. But that's not necessarily always the best way to do it. But just that firsthand experience has shown me how tempting that can be. It's given me a little bit more sympathy for people, that kind of succumb to that a little bit more. And it's not a good thing. It's not an excuse, but I at least like understand it. In your teaching experience, or like looking forward into becoming a teacher in the future, do you have any sense of that?
Of people making me want to like fit into this sort of little cookie cutter sort of thing?
Or more, yes, but also like as a teacher, like being on the teaching end of it, like a sense of like a temptation to just sort of like get people to kind of fit into lockstep with the thing that that works, or the thing that you think is going to work best.
There is a temptation to do that, but ultimately, like, it's going to be important as a teacher to, all right, here's a technique that I know works. I would like you to try it, but if you also find something else that works for you that's better, do that. because again, it all goes back to, what works for me is not necessarily going to work for you. If it does work for you, great. And if it doesn't, all right, how can we figure out a way to make it work for you? So there definitely is that temptation there, because what works, but again, it definitely, you have to be willing to be adaptable, to listen. If the kid is telling you, hey, this isn't working for me, all right, cool. Well, what is working for you? Can you show me? Can you demonstrate that to me? And that's going to help open a dialogue with you and your students as well, seeing why they think that works for them. And maybe it does work for them. It's not my job as a teacher to make these little photocopies of me, because I don't want that. I want them to be their own people and figure stuff out on their own. And, and that's my job, to facilitate them into being able to figure this stuff out on their own, because I'm not always going to be there, So yeah, but definitely the temptation is there all the time. Like, I know this works. Why aren't you doing this thing? And that goes into anything, not just art, just any sort of like behavioral issues or anything like that. Like, this always works for this child. Well, realizing that it always works for one child doesn't mean it's going to work for the next child. So, so it's really anything.
I'm curious, how much of it is in your hands to customize the curriculum or the individual lesson plans? Is that something that's handed to you and then you try to go on script, or is this something that you're given at the start of the year and told to make it work somehow, however you can fit it in?
So we do have a curriculum that's written out for us, but their thing has always been, you can add to the curriculum as much as you want, but you never take away from it. You have to do the basic of what's there. But it's always more fun to build on stuff, like just bring stuff in. Like, one week we were talking about, rocks and minerals. So guess what? I got a whole bunch of at home, bunch of rocks and crystals. And so I brought that stuff in for the kids to look at, and they loved it. And it helps to kind of reinforce those ideas, just kind of building on those little foundations. So yeah, and that's not always the case. The curriculum is written out for us. The lesson plans are written out for us, where I work. But I'm always adding to that, with stuff that I know. And even if I don't know it, I'm like, okay, how can we make this a little more fun for them, in any way that we can.
I mentioned earlier that with artists that want to make tutorials, they get a paralysis analysis. How do you go about if you were to add to a lesson plan or have to mix something up? How do you not get overwhelmed with the amount of perfection that you have to feel you have to meet, that gold standard or whatever?
I just kind of do whatever feels good to me, honestly. Like, if it's something that, again, that I know about, then great, I'm going to bring that in. And if it's not, then I'm just going to go do a little research. And as far as the curriculum goes, it's not really like a thing I feel an issue with, being like overwhelmed, I don't know. It just adding things in where I see a place to add them in, making it a little more fun for them.
So it's like not being too precious with your art. You are just
Yeah.
gonna put something out there, see how it works. If it doesn't work, then you change it on the fly, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much. It goes back to that whole being adaptable sort of thing.
And if you're not getting direct feedback from the students while you're making the tutorial, you just read it yourself and figure what's going to work, what's not going to work, or do you just put it out to the kids and then on the fly make the adjustment?
It's honestly, it's typically like on the fly. Like, I bring something and like, okay, let's see if this works. And it all goes back to like your enthusiasm too, because if your teacher's enthusiastic about something, then the kids are going to be more likely to be enthusiastic about whatever it is you're doing. So if you're like, all right, guys, we're going to learn about, just being bored and stuff, of course they're not going to, want to engage in that activity. You come in with, I don't know, there was one day I came in with, I knew the kids were going to have to count with dice one day, and I have like 3 pounds of D&D dice at home. So I brought D&D dice to work one day, and the kids love those things, like love them. But I knew that was going to be fun for them, because that would have been fun for me if somebody brought these pretty little, colorful dice, and they're like, "Ooh, what is this?" Well, okay, guys, we're going to learn how to count today, but we're going to use these really fun dice right here, not regular dice. So it was my own enthusiasm about what it was I was bringing in that helped them want to do the thing and be excited about doing the thing. So that's going to be a huge key as well, is your own excitement about the stuff.
And then in high school, they get to build their own dice towers.
Yeah, exactly. Like they get to, they remember that foundation that they had way back when, and now they get to apply that. Like, oh, I remember back in pre-K when we did blah, blah, blah. And now I get to do it here, something new and different and exciting. So now they still have that foundation.
So looking forward into like teaching art. I mean, is there even like a way to standardize curriculum for art teachers? It seems like as an art teacher, you would be immune to a lot of some of the other pressures that like a math teacher is going to get. Like, I mean, do you have to worry about standardized testing and whatnot? I'm sure a lot of that has to do with what school you're at, or what type of school district you're in. But yeah, art teaching in particular.
I honestly, I couldn't tell you as far as that goes. But I think there is a sort of place for, like different things and whatnot that they're supposed to learn. Like, as far as standardized testing goes, I don't know if that's something that you have to worry about with art in high school, but it wouldn't surprise me if they made it so that these art teachers had to administer these standardized tests, because I live in a great state for that sort of thing, so, but yeah.
Well, aside from that temptation that we were talking about before, as far as like, of avoiding trying to just impose your will on kids or making them little photocopies of yourself, I would imagine a huge difficulty would be in trying to assess each student's temperament and what they respond to, and then being able to make those adjustments on the fly, as for like how to engage them and get them excited. I mean, do you have a methodology for approaching that, or is it more intuitive, or even the dreaded word talent? Is that a talent?
I think there is some sort of like intuition proclivity towards like having a talent towards these things and assessing, these kids' temperaments and what they respond to and whatnot. And it's going to be like individual, and you're not going to know like immediately. So again, it's going to be going back to those hallmark things of what makes a good teacher, being willing to have all of those aspects, and then look at each student and go, okay, what works for this student doesn't necessarily work for this student. So how are we going to change that up a little bit? And so, yeah, I would definitely say it's, for me at least, a little more intuitive, because you have to kind of learn your students and see where they're at, what they know, how they behave with different things.
So imagining from the student side again, what would you have advice or wisdom for students, if they're of an age to be able to kind of think of these things abstractly, advice for making their experience the best that it can be?
honestly, as far as like students go, I would I would just say go into it with an open mind. Um, be willing to see what it is that you're supposed to learn. Be willing to adapt. Be willing to listen. Um, and be willing to have fun with it. If it's something that is not fun, also be willing to speak up about it if you're having trouble with something, because the teacher's job is to facilitate this sort of learning. And if you're not learning, then not being teaching these kids to not be afraid to speak up and encouraging them to speak up when something isn't suiting their needs. And I'm wanting to teach in high school, so they're at an age where they can do that. And I want it always to be a sort of environment where if they're not learning something, if something's not working for them, I want them to be comfortable enough with me, be safe enough with me to go, all right, Miss Johnson, why isn't this working? I need help with this. What can we do? So yeah.
Yeah, that makes me excited to hear you say that. It's like teaching them to be an advocate for themselves. Something that high school kids, I don't think, get enough of. It's like can be kind of torturous sometimes, as a high school student, as I remember, to sort of feel like you're alone, like you have, and I don't mean like amongst your peer group, you have friends, but you're all kind of like bitching and moaning about the same thing. And you have a sense of powerlessness that you have. So yeah, I mean, I think within that though, there is the call to action, so if you're a student, especially if you're a younger person, like learn what it means to be an activist for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And really that's going to go back all the way to the beginning of when they started going to school, and even beforehand, and teaching kids to speak up when something is not right, because the earlier you start with that stuff, the more likely they're going to want to do that and be able to do that, not be afraid to do that, when something is amiss, So yeah, it's going to be super important for kids to have that, but it's going to be super important for the adults in their lives to teach them to do that, because a lot of adults don't teach them to do that. A lot of adults very much have that mentality of do as I say, not as I do, and don't question and don't ask these things and don't disobey. Well, okay, but that doesn't teach the kid anything. It just teaches them to be this sort of like mindless little automaton. Like it doesn't help at all. Teach your kids to speak up for themselves, whether they're your own kids or if you're a teacher, teach your students to speak up for themselves,
And teaching kids art or being an art teacher, that's even I almost like doubly important, because like artists, as a young person, as a student, that's one thing, but as an artist, like learning to stand up for yourself is like that's a whole other ball game as well. That is vital. No one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. Like, how many times have we as artists, like, we had to stand up for ourselves in regards to, I don't know, our pricing, for instance? How many times have we had people come to us and be like, oh, no, your prices are too expensive. You need to do this for cheaper, or I can go somewhere else and get this for way cheaper. And it's always in an attempt to make you, like, lower your prices or feel bad about why your prices are set this way. It translates to so many things as an artist, and being able to stand up for yourself and set those boundaries is going to be ridiculously important for later on, especially if you want to be in the art field and learning to like value yourself and your work,
So if a student is faced with negative experiences in their school, especially, thinking of, kids in an art school or wanting to study art, maybe they encounter a bad teacher, or they're in a bad school, or they and they don't necessarily have the option of just like, leaving or picking a different school or a different teacher. Would you have any words or advice for how they can process that, or how they can, push through it and hopefully avoid the long-term negative side effects of an experience like that?
I would say it just kind of goes back to being willing to speak up for yourself if you're having those negative experiences, but it's also going to depend on, the adults in their lives, teaching them to have this sort of, I hesitate to call it bravery, although it is a sort of brave thing to speak up for oneself if they're having these sort of issues. But, just having this sort of willingness to like advocate for yourself, and not being afraid to step up and be like, okay, no, this isn't working. It's not right. This isn't, conducive to any sort of good learning or, anything like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we've kind of talked about this in a lot of slightly different ways. I would like to ask this question in more of like a summarizing sort of way, or give you the opportunity to summarize it in a package. What is it that you want to add to the world of teaching art? Above and beyond like, well, why do you want to be an art teacher? What is it that you feel like you want to add to it? Something that you can bring to it?
I don't know. I just want people to not hate going to art classes. I really just want that. I really want kids to come to my class and legitimately want to be there, not necessarily because of me, but because they love what they're about to do. Because it kills me every time I hear one of our friends, people that we know very frequently, saying that they've had horrible experiences in art school and just any other like classroom sort of environment. It kind of kills me to know that people have had, these experiences. So I don't ever want to be that teacher that people remember 20 years down the line of being the shitty teacher, the teacher that made them feel so small and so unloved and not listened to. Like I could name all the teachers that did that sort of thing to me. I can name all the teachers that tore up artwork in front of my face and threw it away, and didn't have my best interests at heart. Weren't willing to listen, weren't willing to be empathetic. I don't ever want to be that teacher. I don't want to be that. Am I going to fail sometimes? Sure, I'm going to fail, but failure is the greatest teacher, though. You learn from your mistakes. And if I can learn what not to do from stuff, then I learn how to be a better teacher for these kids and advocate for them, and helping them want to be there and want to learn, even if they never do anything ever again with art. That's fine. My job is not necessarily to make them want to do art for the rest of their lives, because they have to be there. They have to be. So while they have to be there, my job is going to be making them not hate being there, because they have to be. And a lot of times they know they have to be. And that was very much my own mindset, in high school, going into this art class, like, oh God, I don't want to go to art classes. I don't want somebody teaching me how to, telling me how to do art when I already know how to do art. Well, I got there and I figured out, well, I didn't know everything, and that's the beauty of going to school and learning things, is you don't know everything. And even in college, like I went into it going, yeah, I'm hot shit. I know, I know this stuff. And then I had a teacher tell me, this is my drawing teacher in college. And he's like, oh yeah, let me see your portfolio. And he took a look at my portfolio and he says, yeah, your work's good, but it's boring. And instead of, like, at first you're like, oh my God, your teacher just said your work is boring. But instead of getting offended at that, I was like, okay, What do you mean? And then that's when I learned about line variation. And that's when I learned about all these different things that I had no idea about because, well, I'm sitting here thinking that I'm hot stuff, not realizing, well, okay, if we have some line variation, then we have the ability to throw shapes back in space and bring them forward and, all these other elements that I never considered before because I wasn't open to that sort of idea. So yeah, never want to be that teacher. I never want to be that teacher. And I always want kids to be able to come to me and be like, you know what? Feel like comfortable enough to come to me if I have done something inadvertently that has upset them. I always want that environment to be safe for them.
So as a teacher, do you have to do the poop sandwich type thing where you give a compliment?
Absolutely. We call that the poop sandwich. I have a less nice term for it, but you always start off with, you know what, this is really good. And you pick a specific aspect of it. You don't just say good job. Well, what have they done a good job on? You pick an aspect of that drawing that is good or that you like. And this is really important, especially with 3 and 4 year olds, because a lot of time they bring me scribble artwork and they're like, Miss Johnson, look what I've drawn. I've drawn, a snowman in this, in a car doing blah, blah, blah. And it doesn't look like anything. So instead of saying, well, good job, you say, all right, this is really great. How you've used these shapes to create, the snowman. Maybe try to go and utilize some more colors and see what else you can make for your amazing drawing and do it that way. And that can even translate later on, to high school kids because they're going to be really proud of their stuff. And it's going to be it's really tempting for people to go, well, no, this isn't good, because art is very subjective. And what's good to me is not going to be good to the next person. And what's not good might be good to someone else, So it's not my job to tell them whether or not their art is good. What I'm looking at is technique, the understanding of the media, just utilizing these things to create some kind of cohesive piece. And how can I encourage them to talk about that? And yeah, the poop sandwich is one of those ways that we can encourage them to grow and whatnot.
What you were saying reminded me of a tweet by Justin Donaldson. He has a young family, so he has little kids that will do the scribble drawings that don't actually mean anything, that are mean something to them, but they don't mean anything to anybody who's watching them. So instead of trying to guess what it is, he suggested saying something to the effect of, well, can you tell me more about it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's one of the things that I do every single day. They bring me drawings that I don't know the first thing of what it is. And they have in their mind what it is. And they are expecting you to see that. So, when you don't see that and you go, oh, I really like your drawing. Well, do you like my unicorn? You're like, yeah, I like your unicorn. Well, yeah, I don't know. It doesn't look like a unicorn at all. It looks like a bunch of scribble scrabble on the paper. So instead of saying, oh, I really like your drawing. Oh, can you tell me about this? Is something that I use every day. And it's so important. And it's going to be so important for later on, even in high school. Hey, can you tell me about this? What was your thoughts in making this? You can definitely build on that because they're a lot older and they can, articulate more things a lot better.
Yeah, that ability to give good feedback is an art form in itself, and definitely worth teaching how to give and how to receive it as well. Receiving feedback is a lesson, man. Because some people just they don't do it very well.
No, they really don't.
Well, aside from your whole professional life, I would, as we kind of come into the closing, I would like to talk a little bit about some of your personal creative outlets, of which you have a few. You don't have to go into super deep detail, but I wonder, is it teaching from here on out? Is that your thing, or do you foresee other projects and goals and achievements in the future?
Oh Lord, there's so many things on the table right now. Teaching is definitely one of many things, and I don't necessarily want to teach for forever. And maybe I won't end up teaching in high school. Maybe I'll find some other outlet to teach. But as far as like projects and stuff go, there's books and stories that I've always got my hands in. Working with folks to write new things and build new worlds and stories and whatnot. There is a children's book that I have written, and once things get settled here, in life, that's really one thing I'm gonna be knuckling down and focusing on, is getting that together, because that's always been something that I've wanted to do. As far as like other goals and projects, there's always something I've got my hands in. There's lists of things that I want to do. There's so many things. But I think first and foremost, probably going to be getting that children's book done, because it's written. It just needs illustrating and done. And there's other worlds and stories that I've got my hands in too. So we'll just see. So
That's super cool. I don't know if I knew that you had a children's book, like,
oh yeah,
ready to go.
Yeah.
Is this recent, or how long has this been sitting around?
Oh, it's been a little minute. I've always wanted to write the book, but let's see, I wrote it. When did I write it? The year before last is when I didn't write it in 2020. In 2019 is when I wrote it. It's about a little orc girl, because I thought, there's no children's books about little orcs, and especially not little orc girls that want to be nice. And so that was the whole mindset to that. That's how Nalagar the Nice was born. About this little, Kat knows all about Nalagar. She's it's just a little orc girl that wants to be nice, and that's all she wants to do until her village gets attacked. And it'll be something obviously like child age appropriate and whatnot, but just realizing throughout the course of the story that she can be nice and still fierce and defend her family while being nice was just this sort of fun idea that I had, and she's adorable too, really. So there's that idea. There's like a death deities project that I've had my hands into. All the research is done on that, and just a series of illustrations of like lesser known and more popularly known world deities, and kind of like utilizing that project to see how like different cultures approach death and whatnot. And that kind of came about when my grandmother passed away here a couple of years ago. Like, how do we process death? And that's just, like I said, one of many, many ideas.
Yeah, I actually did know about the little girl character, that little orc girl character, but I didn't know, or it flew by me that there was a book that was going to happen too, and that's so cool.
Oh, yeah.
There's something about writing kids books that I'm so envious of, and I would love to add that to my project list at some point in the future as well. It just seems like such a cool thing to know that like little kids are reading something that you created. Like, again, it kind of goes back to that, like, influencing the minds of the young people. I don't know if it's just like ego or what, or maybe that's okay. Like maybe it's all right to feel a lot of self-satisfaction and pat myself on the back for like, yeah, I'm putting something in. Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with like being happy that you were able to like influence a kid into doing something that they wanted to do, that they loved, or just you were able to help them. It's like that whole mentality of like not congratulating yourself for doing a good job on your art because it's so like prideful or whatever, when we really should congratulate ourselves when something is going well. I can't tell you how many times I've been on stream and I'm like, I make the most ridiculous of noises when, when I figure out something or something's going really cool, and then I instantly stop and apologize. And like everybody in the chat's like, stop apologizing for your happiness. So if it's something that's made you happy, and you're doing good at it and you like it, then it's not bad to say, you know what, I did that. I helped a kid do that,
I feel like I need to slide in here and pass along some suggestions that we've gotten for Joby. Now that they're on the topic of stories, we've had several people suggest that you read bedtime stories to their kids and put videos on that on YouTube or something. So like Joby reads, and then you can also throw in your little philosophy in there, so you can feel like you're making an impact on your life. Good night, moon. And the moon it's in space. It's very far away, but it's closer than you might think. And by the way, also the moon is made of cheese. By the way, back to the story now.
Oh my God.
That's
a really great idea.
You're hired. Write me up some scenarios, and
no, this is all you. You write up the. All you have to do is read up Good Night Moon, and then you throw in your tangents as you go, and now it's not copyrighted because you're going off script.
Yeah,
I'm reading books that have already been written. Oh, okay. If I was writing my own shit and I had to do that, then no, it's
No, but see, that's again, Moose, that's a really important thing you kind of touched on there, because that's again how you make those lessons fun and draw more things into the learning, other than, all right, we're reading this book about Goodnight Moon. Okay, all right, this book is about the moon. Let's learn about the moon and take that chance to like scaffold and build on these ideas, like one on top of the other, until we've gotten on this crazy big tangent about space and stardust and how we're all from there. So I don't know.
This is actually, like, not to hijack your interview, Beth, but this has actually just got me kind of hyped up, because I think about this book that actually I think we gave it away because I was getting so frustrated with it. It's the story of the Little Red Hen. And if anybody has read that, it's like the Little Red Hen asks all these people to help her do all of these various stages of baking bread, and no one wants to help her. So then when she actually like does it herself, she's like, hey, who wants to help me eat it? And then everybody wants to help. And she's like, no, I'm going to eat it myself because nobody helped. And as I'm reading the book, I'm thinking along the way, it's like, well, all these like other people, they were doing other shit. They were doing their job. Like, why were you trying to like siphon all of this energy from them to help you bake bread? You did fine by yourself. And it's like, okay, yeah, you're right. Now I want to read this as a YouTube story and be like, here's why this book is communist propaganda.
Oh my God, Jody.
The cow cannot actually jump over the moon because it does not have the hind leg strength to accelerate and break Earth's gravity.
There's no gravity. Gravity's fake, Moose. We know this.
In other words, I'm just ruining the fun. That's what's going to happen. Is I'm going to make all of these like great kid stories not fun.
Yeah, it's going to be called Joby Ruins Everything.
Coming back to you, Beth, though, where would you like people to go if they wanted to find out more about you and the work that you do? Where should we send them?
Oh, they can go to my website. That's daydreamsanddragonwings.com. I think there's a link here in the chat or whatever. It's kind of a long website. They can also go to my Instagram. They can go, let's see, that's daydreams_n_dragonwings at Instagram. They can go to my Twitter. They can go pretty much any social media place except for Facebook. We don't do the old Facebook anymore. And just kind of see what I'm doing. I'm posting stuff pretty regularly. They can even find me on TikTok, posting the time-lapse videos from Procreate and everything that I do there. So yeah, shorten it. Yeah, that's the thing. There's going to be some name changes here coming up soon anyway. So, that's in the old to-do list. But yeah, definitely my website. You can go to and see a portfolio of my work, and if you're interested in commissions, all that other stuff. So
alternatively,
just in time for him to drop off. Well, that gives me the opportunity to observe that being on TikTok is probably a great way to stay fresh and stay in the mind of
Oh yeah.
kids and what's motivating and stimulating younger audiences.
Oh yeah, the old TikTok is it's fun. It's a new platform, and it's just kind of fun to go put your time lapse stuff on there and throw a little music on, and it's really easy. There's not really any crazy thinking to it. You just put the videos on and see how it goes.
What were you going to say before you disappeared, Moose?
I was just going to say, it was a joke, and the timing is all messed up now. But anyway, I was going to suggest extending the length of the username. So it could be daydreams or night dreams and or possibly dragon wings, if you would allow it. .com.
Listen, so my Twitch name used to actually be Daydreams and Dragon Wings, and then I got griped at for that being too dang long. So that's why we're at that Day Dragon now. But yeah.
Well, people don't know that they can tab complete usernames.
No, I know. I tried to tell them that. We're looking at certain people we won't call out here today, but yeah.
Fair enough.
Well, Moose, unless you had anything that you wanted to follow up with.
No, I think I shot out all my questions as we went.
Awesome. Then that brings us to our trademark final question. Aside from work and personal projects, Beth, what is one thing in the world that you're excited about?
Oh, vaccines. Get your vaccines, people, so that we can get back to normal. I'm so excited about that. Like, just the idea of being able to, like, be done with all this COVID nonsense is just, it's just great. This is great.
I have to be Debbie Downer on that. Some states are some states are projected not to reach herd immunity because not enough of the population wants the vaccine.
Grown. Get your vaccine, people, if you want, or not even if you want, just get the dang vaccine. You don't want COVID. Trust me, I've had COVID. It sucks. You don't want it. Get the vaccine.
And convince your friends to get the vaccine, and maybe their parents. Maybe that's the more applicable target audience for this. I don't know.
Yeah, get your 5G chips in there, kiddos. It's really great. Your reception's great. Mine's good.
I'm going to avoid all of the rants that could happen on states not reaching herd immunity because we want to end on a happy note. Thank you so much, Beth. It has been wonderful to talk to you. I could not be more excited about knowing that someone like you is going to be in the world teaching people art, teaching young kids art. And I think that is just a net gain for the world at large. So thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for your service. And I will wave goodbye. And